All right, let's get started. Thanks again for showing up to another training. I see that I've made a mistake. It says training 2. This is actually training 3, and we're going to be talking about engaging in the classroom and some of the tools for managing the various different aspects of engagement and things that you can do in Zoom to sort of make your class a little more exciting. We'll talk about discussion versus lecture. We'll go over the toolbar in Zoom and the different features that are available to you. Talk a little bit about the spotlight video option and sort of the different ways that you can change your view in Zoom. Discuss the chat feature and the reactions feature. And then we'll talk a little bit about what to do with you come across a tech issue and how our student techs can help address that. And we'll also be discussing the role of Zoom assistants in your class. So let's begin with lecture and discussion. So depending on your class, everybody will have a different way of running their class, and that is totally up to you to get creative with. Some folks will find that it's more beneficial to their material to do sort of a standard lecture style in their class, in which case you might need to use features like chat or reactions a little bit more to facilitate the discussion aspect, since it'll be more lecture heavy. Some folks might have a smaller class and find that they don't need some of those tools because there is just more discussion available with a smaller group. Some folks will want to use some pre-recorded material or do video share, which is fine. That's totally great. And if you were here for last week's training, then you'll know some of the challenges that you might face using videos and how bandwidth can impact that content. So I'll do a little reminder at the end of some ways to improve your bandwidth to make sharing videos or doing pre-recorded material a little less glitchy. But I do want to remind everyone that if this is something that you think is going to be heavily a part of your class, just remember that even if you get to a point where you feel comfortable with your own computer's ability to share content like video, your class participants might not be having the same experience, and so it could end up being glitchy on their end, and it's really hard to do anything about that since it's on their computer and we're all physical distancing. So just keep that in mind when putting media into your presentation. We're getting a little feedback. If someone could please mute their microphone. All right, so let's talk about the menu bar. So by now you've probably noticed in Zoom that you have a toolbar that will appear most likely at the very bottom of your screen. And so there are a few differences in devices. For example, if you're using an Apple product like an iPad, you might notice that your toolbar or other features appear at the top of your screen rather than the bottom. Either way, this menu bar is going to have the tools on it that you can use to engage with your class participants. This menu bar appears when you move your mouse and hover over the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen, depending on your device. So it doesn't necessarily remain active at all times. So if it disappears, never fear, it's there. Just move your mouse to the bottom of your screen. If you have a smaller device, again, using an iPad as an example, you will probably benefit from clicking More, which will pull up a list of additional options and tools for you. Obviously, this works on a PC too. You may not need the additional features, but it is there as an option. The first tool that we are going to look at is the chat tool. And this is a favorite. Chat is great. It's incredibly useful. It's a feature that you can use in the meeting to send messages to other users. So ideally, you could send a message to anyone, or you could send a private message to just one individual in the group. I do want to warn folks that you don't want to send anything that you wouldn't want everyone to read, just because you never know. One wrong click and you send a message to the entire group. The chat will open up on your right-hand side. So if you're new to chat, you're in a meeting and you click on the chat option, it'll open up a little window on the right-hand side that looks like this image that you see here. There's a little drop down next to the to, which says, in this image, it says to everyone. Clicking that drop down will give you the option to pick a specific person to send a message to. It'll show you a list of everyone who is in the chat. And then you see there's no send button. You just hit enter and that will send your message. This is a great tool for lectures where, you know, folks might have questions that come up during the lecture, but you are in your flow state and you really can't take the time to answer everybody's question right then and there. And so having people write in their questions means they don't forget and you have a chance to address them later. It's also a great way for people to just sort of connect in the class when discussion might be less than ideal. So it's a good time to say hey to your neighbors or ask how somebody's doing. And people really do appreciate that extra option to connect with folks through chat. So this is a really excellent tool, and how you use it is up to you, but it is something that I would say people have found a lot of use from. One thing with chat is that it can become a little bit complicated if you've got a long string of chats and you're trying to answer everybody's question, but you've got several coming in at one time. And we're going to discuss a little bit later on. Herb is going to talk to us a little bit about how a Zoom assistant can help you manage things like chat. But hang tight because we will come back to that. The next tool in this menu bar that I want to talk about is the Participants button. The Participants button brings up the Participants box, which contains a list of all of the participants in the meeting, and it also gives you some additional controls. So you'll see, for example, on this image, this is where the Participants tool is, and this is sort of what you see when you pull it up, is this list of everyone who is in the meeting. You'll also see that there's an opportunity at the bottom to look at more options. And here's where it's important to note the difference in what you see versus what everyone else sees. When you are teaching your class, you are going to be given host or co-host control over the meeting. And the way that works is because a UNCA staff person or an OLLI staff person, myself or Herb or one of our student techs, will start the meeting, they will be the host. And then they'll give you the co-host or host role so that you have more access to these tools that we're talking about right now. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what can I really do with that? What kind of extra power does that give me? Well, for starters, you can mute everybody at once, which I am about to do because I can hear that there are still some microphones on. And being able to mute everyone is really useful because when you're giving a lecture and that background noise is coming through, it can be incredibly distracting. Or maybe you have taken a break and you've done an open discussion where folks ask questions and then you return to your lecture. You want to just go ahead and mute everybody. It's a nice, easy way to just sort of have a little bit more control over the menu, over the class. Another cool thing that you can do here is under that more key, once you are the host or the co-host, you'll see you have a few other options like just changing some of the settings. Few of them are locked through our account, so like allowing participants to rename themselves. That's a feature that we have set for all of our accounts. So if somebody comes in and they're using an iPad and it's got a weird random name on it, they can rename themselves so everybody knows who everybody is in the class, which is really useful. As the host, you can also do this. So going to a participant will, if you hover over their name, so you see that you've got this list of names here, you can hover over that name or their name inside of their thumbnail image. Either one will give you extra options, and you can do things like create a private chat with that person directly from their name or rename them if they're having some technical difficulties figuring out how to do it on their own. You can mute people individually. So if you notice that, someone had to go answer the door and they forgot to mute themselves and their dog is barking and it's just very disruptive, you can go ahead and mute them directly from either the participants box or by hovering directly over their thumbnail image, which is pretty useful. So you've got some tools to play around with there. One of the most useful tools that you have at your disposal in Zoom is the ability to give nonverbal feedback. So again, we've all experienced sort of the chaos that can happen through having a bunch of people talk at once on a Zoom call. And maybe if you have a really small class, that's not going to be a problem for you, but it's nice to be able to have some tools so that folks can just sort of let you know without unmuting themselves and talking. So let's start with the reactions key, and we will do a little trial of this after the presentation so everyone can sort of experiment with it a little bit. In that toolbar that we were looking at, one of your options that you'll see is the reactions button, and it's just a little smiley face with a plus sign over it that says reactions. And from there, you can select a thumbs up or an applause. This is really nice because it is something that will appear for just 5 seconds. So it's a nice little short way for someone to give an indication of whatever it is that you choose to use those reactions for. But it also goes away on its own. Those are really nice. There is a second way to do this, and that's this second image that you see on the bottom, which is located within the participants box. So going back to where we were, you click on participants on your toolbar, and then you should see some options that look like this. And again, depending on the device that you're on, you may have to hit more in order to see some more of these options. So if you're on a PC, you might see them all. If you're on a mobile device, you might see just an abbreviated version of them. So that's an important thing to remember, especially if you've got folks in your class who are a little concerned that they don't have this feature. Clicking more, depending on your advice, will sometimes pull up some of those additional icons. So the way you get here is you click on that participants button, and you will see some reactions right there lined up on the bottom. And you can click one of those reactions and it will appear in 2 places. It will appear in that list of participants that we just saw, that list of names. Directly next to the person's name is the little icon. So if it's raise hand, the little raise hand icon will appear. It will also appear at the bottom of your screen in the participants, so hovering over the participants icon. So if I now see Bill has raised his hand and it's giving me a little indicator, a little notice, and so you can sort of, if you are lecturing and you want to have that indication that somebody has a question, it'll pop up right there. Of course, if it's not something you want, then you want to let your participants know, hey, this is distracting for me. Wait until the designated time that we are doing a question and answer. But again, it's really up to you sort of how you decide to manage that sort of thing. The one thing that's different about the icons in the participants box versus just your standard reactions is that they're not going to disappear. So you have to click again on that raise hand to lower hand. And so once you click raise hand, the button will turn to lower hand. So you can lower your hand. And if you don't, then the little hand raise will remain visible. That being said, it's also important to note that the raise hand reaction only appears to the participants. If you are the host, you won't have that option. I don't know why Zoom made it that way. Maybe they think you won't be asking a question in your own class. I'm not sure. But don't be alarmed if you have been made the host of a class and you can't raise your hand. It's just a feature that's there for the participants. So those are two ways to receive notifications that folks have something to contribute or question to ask. And oftentimes people find that it's handy to say, oh, okay, I see Bill raised his hand. Bill, will you unmute and ask your question? And then go from there. And again, this is a great place to think about Zoom assistants and how they can help you sort of manage this type of thing. And I would love to have Herb talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Hi, Jacqueline and all. I'm going to take Jacqueline's screen down and put another one up. And when you are the host, you can also take down someone's screen share and put another one up. It's a great little feature. One thing we've discovered, and if you can't hear me, unmute yourself and just let me know since I'm not looking at your faces. One thing that we've learned in the summer term is that participants can be very helpful within a class. And while we'll have a student tech and a staff member open your meeting or open your class at the beginning, we also want to assign someone to your class who is basically there to help you as the instructor manage chat, manage conversations, help you behind the scenes. And so we're going to appoint Zoom assistants. And for instance, if Jacqueline was my Zoom assistant right now, she might hear someone in the background chatting, and she could, as the co-host, go in and mute that person. So that's one of the functions that a Zoom assistant will have in your classroom. The Zoom assistant will also be able to be the person who can check the roster and attendance. And we will be doing this in the fall term in a better, more sophisticated way than we did it in the summer term. We'll actually send the instructor and the Zoom assistant a copy of the roster that they can use each week to check off who is in attendance. And one advantage to this is you have the whole 90 or 60 minutes to figure out who's there and check off the roster. But that's not something that the instructor needs to worry about if we can have a Zoom assistant take over that role. The Zoom assistant can also help manage the flow during your question and answer period or any discussion period that you might have. And if everyone could, well, I'll have you check your chat function after we finish. But I'll show you a way in which we've managed the chat function in a couple of classes this summer that works really well for questions and answers. The Zoom assistant also can be appointed co-host, and as Jacqueline has pointed out, can manage the mute function. The Zoom assistant can basically watch what's going on in the classroom and assist the instructor in managing the class. If someone is having lunch and they forgot to mute their microphone and they're eating a big old bag of crunchy potato chips, the Zoom assistant can actually mute that person without them even knowing it, without having to call them out and ask them to identify themselves. So there are lots of ways in which the Zoom assistant can help behind the scenes. Mostly the Zoom assistant will be someone who's participating in the class, but also committed to paying attention to what's going on and just being someone who can assist the instructor in maintaining order. Because the Zoom assistant and the instructor are working together, we certainly would like the instructors to recruit their own Zoom assistant. You don't have to. We're happy to appoint someone and seek your approval for that person. But if you've used someone in the past in your classroom and you would like that person to be in your classroom to help you manage the discussion and manage the classroom, just let us know who that is and we'll bring them to a training, and we we'll set them up and get them ready to be your Zoom assistant. I will place the Zoom assistants in a class before registration so that you will have an opportunity to have at least one practice session with your Zoom assistant. So this person will automatically get a seat in a classroom before we assign those other seats during registration. And just as a helpful hint, instructors can also make excellent Zoom assistants. So we certainly would encourage you as an instructor to also volunteer to be a Zoom assistant in this classroom. And in fact, you and another assistant might share that function for one another. So there are lots of ways in which we want to train Zoom assistants to be your assistant in the classroom. One of those ways is to manage discussion. And one way in which we worked very effectively this summer in one of the classes was for the Zoom assistant to basically use the chat function and watch who raises their hand by either literally raising it on the screen, or as Jacqueline showed you just moments ago, you may be able to raise your hand. As she said, I can't give you a demonstration of that. Jacqueline may be able to raise her hand, or all of you might find that function and raise your hand. But we found out this summer that it was easier to see when someone used the reaction button and literally clapped their hands together like I'm doing now to get their attention. And that means I would like to be next to speak. And what the Zoom assistant can do in the chat function area is to maintain a list of who speaks next. So I've done that with this sample that I've posted in the chat room, that I've noticed that Alice, Benjamin, Charlie, and Dawn, in that order, have asked to speak. And that way Alice, Benjamin, Charlie, and Dawn can relax because I've seen their hand raised. And when Alice and Benjamin are finished speaking, I can also copy and paste this and repost it and let everyone know that Charlie and Dawn are next. So we'll help the Zoom assistants understand different functions that they can use to assist you in the classroom. And we're going to announce this role of Zoom assistants in around the time that we announce the registration procedure in the fall schedule. So that's what we have planned for Zoom assistants, Jacqueline.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I will go ahead and share my screen again, and we can finish up here. Perfect. So that's incredibly helpful. I know that we've gone over this a few times already, but I think it's really important and it's a great feature, and you probably will get questions about it. So changing your view in Zoom can also be one way to sort of organize discussion and sort of organize how you're going about having people interact. So full screen mode obviously is just sort of when it's taking up your entire screen, and you can exit from that by hitting escape, or there's a little minimize option in the corner. You can have a full screen for either the active or the gallery view. So the active view, well, here, let me go to the next one. So the gallery view, let's start with gallery, is that whole grid of folks. And this is where you see everybody's thumbnail image. And this is great for discussion because you can kind of all, it's the next best thing to everybody sitting in the front row in a circle. You can all stare at each other. It's great. Within this view, within gallery view, you can also spotlight somebody's video. So that person then becomes the main video that you see even in the grid. So it's got a little green highlight around it, and it sort of draws the eye, but you're still in this gallery view. And the way that you do that is you would hover over the picture, the thumbnail image of the video. It can be your own, and you'll see 3 little dots. When you click them, we'll pull up a menu and you'll select Spotlight Video. Like I said, this is a really good one for any kind of discussion-based portion of your class. In the top right corner, you can toggle between this gallery view and speaker view. So if you hit speaker view, you'll see the large image of the person who is speaking, and then a row of thumbnail images, probably located at the top, again, varying a little bit based on the device that you're using, but generally appearing sort of surrounding that image of the main speaker. And again, this is going to spotlight whoever is making a sound. So like Herb said, if it's that crinkly bag of chips, that person is going to be highlighted, whether they like it or not. But if you are doing a lecture and it's less discussion, but you're not sharing your screen, this is another really great time to use that spotlight video feature. So here you can see an example of it. You see there's the 3 little dots, and when clicked on, there is a menu that is brought up with a few options. You can mute that person, stop their video so you can't see and hear the chips. You can chat with them directly from here, or you can spotlight the video. Pinning the video is essentially the same thing. It just sort of makes it the central video that appears on everybody's screen rather than switching between speakers. So, if we weren't doing a screen share right now and I was just telling you this, I might spotlight my video so that, I would be highlighted as the speaker. Tech issues during class. How do you deal with those? I would first encourage everyone to test their sound and video before class begins. And we will be encouraging class participants to do this as well. It can never hurt to give folks a little reminder. They can go to zoom.us/test, or just, join the meeting a little bit early. So these are testing out your sound and video before class begins is a good way to avoid issues during class. But you know what? It happens, and it will happen. So what do you do when that situation comes up? There's some troubleshooting. Sometimes it's real easy. Nobody can hear you. Well, you're muted. Easy fix, right? The intention is also to have a staff person or a student tech who is available in the majority of classes for assistance. And again, some folks won't need this, but the hope is to have it for most people, to have a student there. So if something does go wrong, that student is just sort of a silent figure in the background who can then jump in and help troubleshoot whatever issue is coming up. We have some really wonderful students from UNCA who help us do this, and I am actually meeting with them tomorrow to talk about their role. So that's really exciting. A last resort is to take them into a separate breakout room and sort of deal with the issue one-on-one, so it's not disruptive. That's kind of a last resort if the student can't help in class. And sometimes you get kicked off the call and you just got to try again next time, and that's really rare. But maybe your laptop dies, the battery dies, and you don't have your charger, and well, that's not really a tech issue that any of us can fix. So things to keep in mind. It does happen. We'll try to minimize it as much as possible, but you want to have the tools to sort of minimize the damage. Bandwidth is a big one. We talked a lot about that last week. Some of the ways that you can reduce issues would be just encourage people to turn off their video. If you're in class and one of your participants says, hey, you keep freezing, it's causing a problem. It could be that if you're just giving a lecture, maybe turning off your video would help, or have them, if it's on their end, turn off their video. Encouraging folks to stay muted. And speaker view is also a nice way to sort of reduce the amount of bandwidth, because it's just really highlighting one image rather than however many you have in your class. So just some ways that you can sort of minimize your potential for bandwidth issues as a tech problem within your class. And again, keeping all that in mind, the mantra for this term is simplicity, keeping it simple, especially if this is your first time teaching on Zoom. It's going to be great. It's going to be a wonderful success. You don't have to do all the same stuff that you might do in person, and keep it simple.